The Silver Dollar Saloon reeked of stale tobacco, spilled whiskey, and broken dreams. Jack Lone Wolf Hollister sat hunched over the scarred wooden bar, his weathered hands wrapped around his sixth, or was it seventh, glass of rot-gut whiskey. The amber liquid burned his throat, but not enough to burn away the memories that haunted him every October 15th. "Hi, how are you? Sorry to interrupt your story, but what I'm going to ask you is really quick, and it will really help the channel to grow and create new stories. Just click below the video image to subscribe. You'll be doing an act of kindness and encouragement to those who are just starting out. Thank you very much, and continue with your story now." 3 years. 3 long, agonizing years since the fever took his boy. "Another," Jack mumbled to the bartender, a grizzled man named Pete who'd seen enough broken souls to know when to pour and when to listen. "Maybe you've had enough for tonight, Jack," Pete suggested gently, but he was already reaching for the bottle. In Tombstone, Arizona, a man's demons were his own business. Jack's steel-gray eyes, bloodshot and hollow, stared at his reflection in the grimy mirror behind the bar. At 42, he looked a decade older. The desert sun had carved deep lines around his eyes, and grief had etched even deeper ones around his mouth. His dark hair, once thick and proud, now showed streaks of premature silver. "Tommy would have been 10 today," Jack whispered, more to himself than to Pete. 10 years old. Sarah used to say he had my stubborn streak but her gentle heart. The saloon's usual chaos, poker games, loud conversations, and off-key piano music faded into background noise as Jack's mind drifted back to that terrible autumn 3 years ago. The fever had come fast, burning through their small ranch like wildfire. One day, Tommy was chasing chickens in the yard, laughing with the pure joy that only children possess. 3 days later, Jack was digging a small grave on the hill behind their house. Sarah had tried to be strong. God knows she'd tried. But every sunrise brought fresh reminders of their loss. Tommy's empty chair at breakfast, his unused toys scattered around the house, the silence where his laughter used to ring. "I can't stay here, Jack," she'd said through tears 6 months after the funeral. "Every corner of this place reminds me of what we've lost. I need to go home to my parents for a while." A while had turned into forever. Sarah's letters had stopped coming after the first year, and Jack had stopped writing after the second. Now he lived alone on the ranch with only his horse Rosie and his memories for company. The whiskey was finally doing its job, blurring the sharp edges of his pain. Jack fumbled for his pocket watch, a wedding gift from Sarah, and squinted at the time. Nearly midnight. He should head home, but the thought of that empty house made his stomach churn. "One more," he slurred, but Pete was already shaking his head. "You can barely sit straight, Jack. Time to call it a night." Jack wanted to argue, but the room was starting to spin. He dropped some coins on the bar, probably too many, but he couldn't focus enough to count, and slid off the bar stool. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The cool desert air hit him like a slap as he pushed through the saloon's bat-wing doors. Tombstone's main street was mostly empty except for a few late-night stragglers and the occasional cowboy looking for trouble. Jack's horse, Rosie, waited patiently at the hitching post where he'd left her hours ago. "Come on, girl," Jack mumbled, fumbling with the reins. "Let's go home to our empty house and our empty lives." Rosie, a patient chestnut mare who'd been his companion for 8 years, nickered softly as if she understood his pain. Jack had bought her right after Tommy was born, thinking his son would learn to ride on her gentle back. Another dream that had died with the fever. Jack grabbed the saddle horn and tried to pull himself up, but his coordination was shot. His boots slipped from the stirrup, and instead of mounting Rosie, he found himself falling backward. The world spun in a kaleidoscope of stars and street lamps before he hit the dusty ground hard. Pain exploded through his back and shoulder, but the whiskey dulled it to a manageable throb. Jack lay there staring up at the vast Arizona sky, too drunk and too tired to get up. Maybe he'd just sleep here. Maybe a rattlesnake would find him and put him out of his misery. "Mister? Hey, mister, you okay?" The voice was young, maybe 12 or 13, with a slight Mexican accent. Jack tried to focus on the small figure standing over him, but the boy's face kept swimming in and out of focus. "I'm fine," Jack lied, though he made no effort to get up. "Just resting." "You don't look fine. You look like you fell off your horse and can't get up." Despite his condition, Jack almost smiled. The kid had spirit. "What's your name, boy?" "Danny. Danny Martinez." The boy crouched down, studying Jack with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed too old for his young face. "You're bleeding a little from your head." Jack reached up and felt the warm stickiness on his temple. "Nothing that won't heal." "Can you stand up?" "Probably not without falling down again." Danny looked around the empty street, then back at Jack. "Where do you live? I can help you get home." "Why would you do that?" Jack asked, genuinely curious. "Don't even know me." "Don't know anybody in this town," Danny replied with a shrug. "But my mama always said you help folks when they need it, even if they're strangers." Something in the boy's voice, a note of loss that Jack recognized all too well, made him look more carefully at Danny. The kid was thin, too thin, and his clothes were dusty and worn. Street clothes, orphan clothes. "Your mama sounds like a wise woman," Jack said softly. "She was." Danny's voice caught slightly. She's gone now." Jack felt a familiar stab of pain, but this time it wasn't just for his own loss. "I'm sorry, son." "Come on," Danny said, standing up and offering Jack his hand. "Let's get you on your horse. You can't sleep in the street." With Danny's help, and the boy was surprisingly strong for his size, Jack managed to get back on his feet. The world tilted dangerously, and he had to grab Rosie's saddle to keep from falling again. "I don't think I can ride," Jack admitted. "That's okay. I'll lead your horse. You just hold on." Danny helped Jack climb into the saddle, where he slumped forward against Rosie's neck. The boy took the reins and began walking, leading them through Tombstone's quiet streets toward the desert beyond. "How do you know where I live?" Jack mumbled. "I don't, but I figure you'll tell me when we get close. Most folks around here live outside town anyway." As they walked, Jack found himself studying the boy through his alcohol-induced haze. Danny moved with the careful awareness of someone who'd learned to watch for danger, constantly scanning the shadows and alleys they passed. His clothes were clean but patched, and his boots were worn thin at the soles. "How long you been on your own?" Jack asked. "Few months," Danny replied without looking back. Since Mama died." "Got any other family?" "No, sir. Just me now." The simple statement hit Jack like a physical blow. Here was another child who'd lost everything, just like Tommy would have been if he'd lived and Jack had died instead. The irony wasn't lost on him. On the anniversary of his son's death, he'd been helped by a boy who had no father. "Turn left at that big cactus," Jack directed as they reached the edge of town. "My place is about 2 miles out." They walked in comfortable silence through the desert night, with only the sound of Rosie's hooves and the distant call of coyotes to break the quiet. Jack found himself oddly grateful for the boy's presence. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't spending this terrible anniversary completely alone. When they finally reached Jack's ranch, a modest adobe house with a barn and corral, Danny helped him down from the horse and steadied him to the front door. "Thank you," Jack said, meaning it more than the boy could know. "You're a good kid, Danny Martinez. You gonna be okay now?" Jack looked at the boy's concerned face and felt something stir in his chest, something he'd thought had died with Tommy. "Yeah, I'll be fine. You got somewhere to sleep tonight?" Danny shrugged. "I'll find something. Always do." Jack wanted to invite the boy in, but the whiskey was making his thoughts fuzzy, and he wasn't sure he could trust his judgment. "There's a blanket in the barn if you need it, and some feed sacks that make decent bedding." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate it." As Jack stumbled into his house, he heard Danny leading Rosie toward the barn. The boy's quiet competence reminded him of himself at that age, self-reliant, careful, and far too grown up for his years. Jack collapsed onto his bed, fully clothed, the room spinning around him. As consciousness faded, his last thought was of dark, intelligent eyes and a voice that carried the weight of loss. Tomorrow, when the whiskey wore off, he'd have questions for young Danny Martinez. But tonight, For the first time in 3 years, Jack Hollister wasn't facing his grief entirely alone. Jack's head felt like it had been trampled by a herd of cattle when he finally dragged himself out of bed the next morning. Sunlight streamed through his bedroom window with the intensity of a branding iron, and every sound seemed amplified tenfold. He stumbled to the kitchen, desperate for coffee, and trying to piece together the fragments of the previous night. He remembered the saloon, the whiskey, and falling off Rosie, but how had he gotten home? The details were frustratingly hazy, like trying to catch smoke with his bare hands. After brewing a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead, Jack stepped onto his front porch and immediately noticed something that made him pause. Rosie was in her stall in the barn, properly unsaddled and brushed down. He certainly hadn't done that in his condition last night. "What the hell?" Jack muttered, walking toward the barn with his coffee mug in hand. As he approached Rosie's stall, he heard a soft rustling from the hayloft above. Jack climbed the ladder carefully, his head still pounding, and found a young Mexican boy curled up on a pile of feed sacks, using an old horse blanket for cover. The sight triggered a flood of memories from the night before. Danny Martinez, the boy who'd helped him home when he was too drunk to help himself. "Hey there," Jack said softly, not wanting to startle the kid. Danny's eyes snapped open immediately, and he was on his feet in seconds, the reflexes of someone who'd learned that survival often depended on being ready to run. "Sorry, mister," Danny said quickly. You said I could use the barn, but if you changed your mind—" "Easy, son," Jack interrupted, raising his hand. "You're fine. I just came to check on Rosie and found you instead." He studied the boy in the morning light, noting details he'd missed in his drunken state the night before. Danny was probably 12 or 13, with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of lean build that spoke of too many missed meals. "You took care of my horse." "Yes, sir. She's a good mare. Gentle. Reminded me of—" Danny's voice trailed off. "Reminded you of what?" "Nothing, sir. Just, my mama used to work with horses." Jack nodded, filing that information away. "You hungry? I was about to make some breakfast." Danny's eyes lit up, but he tried to hide his eagerness. "I don't want to be any trouble." "No trouble. Come on." In the kitchen, Jack cooked up eggs, bacon, and biscuits, while Danny sat at the small wooden table, looking around the modest but well-kept house. Jack noticed the boy's eyes lingering on a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. A picture of Jack, a beautiful woman with kind eyes, and a young boy with a gap-toothed grin. "That's my family," Jack said quietly, following Danny's gaze. "My wife, Sarah, and my son, Tommy." "Where are they now?" Danny asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Sorry, that's not my business." "It's all right." Jack set a plate of food in front of Danny and watched the boy try not to wolf it down too quickly. "Tommy died 3 years ago. Fever. Sarah, she went to live with her parents in California after that." "I'm sorry," Danny said simply, and Jack could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. "What about you?" Jack asked, settling into the chair across from Danny. "You said your mother passed. What happened?" Danny's fork paused halfway to his mouth, and Jack saw a flash of pain cross the boy's face. "She was hanged, sir. 6 months ago." Jack nearly choked on his coffee. "Hanged? What for?" "They said she stole a necklace from her employer, but she didn't do it." Danny's voice was fierce with conviction. "Mama never stole nothing in her life. She was honest as the day is long." "Who was her employer?" "Samuel Blackwood. Owns the biggest ranch in Tucson. Mama worked there as a housekeeper for 2 years before—" Danny's voice broke slightly. Jack knew the name. Samuel Blackwood was a powerful man in Arizona territory, with connections to politicians and business leaders throughout the region. If Blackwood had wanted someone gone, it wouldn't have been hard to arrange. "Tell me what really happened," Jack said gently. Danny was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust this stranger who'd shown him kindness. Finally, he began to speak. "My papa died when I was 8. He was a prospector, always chasing stories about lost mines and buried treasure. Mama used to laugh at his stories, said he was a dreamer. After he died, we found some of his things in an old trunk. Maps, journals, letters. Danny reached into his shirt and pulled out a small, worn piece of paper. This was hidden in one of Papa's books. Mama didn't pay it much attention at first, thought it was just another one of his wild dreams. Jack took the paper and examined it. It appeared to be part of a letter, written in faded ink. The handwriting was careful and precise, and Jack could make out what looked like coordinates and references to landmarks. "What is it?" Jack asked. Papa believed it was directions to the Lost Dutchman's mine, Danny said quietly. "You know, the legendary gold mine that's supposed to be hidden somewhere in the Superstition Mountains." Jack had heard the stories, of course. Every man in the Arizona Territory had heard tales of the Lost Dutchman's mine, a fabulously rich gold deposit that had supposedly been worked by a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz until his death in 1891. Waltz had taken the secret of the mine's location to his grave, and dozens of treasure hunters had died trying to find it. "Most folks think it's just a legend," Jack said carefully. "That's what Mama thought, too, until Mr. Blackwood found out about the letter." "How did he find out?" Danny's face darkened. Mama was cleaning his study one day when she accidentally knocked over some papers. The letter fell out of her apron pocket and Mr. Blackwood saw it. He got real interested real fast, started asking all kinds of questions about where it came from and if there were more. "What did your mother tell him?" "The truth, that it belonged to my papa, and she didn't know what it meant. But Mr. Blackwood, he got this look in his eyes, like a man who'd seen gold. He demanded Mama give him the letter, said it rightfully belonged to him since she was working on his property when she had it." "But she refused?" "Yes, sir. Mama said it was the only thing she had left of Papa, and she wasn't giving it to nobody. That's when things got bad." Danny's voice grew quiet, and Jack could see the boy was reliving painful memories. "Mr. Blackwood started making Mama's life difficult. Cut her pay, gave her extra work, threatened to fire her, but Mama was stubborn. She hid the letter somewhere safe and told him if he wanted it, he'd have to kill her for it." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. And a week later, Mrs. Blackwood's diamond necklace went missing. They searched all the servants' quarters and found it hidden in Mama's room. Danny's eyes blazed with anger. "But I know Mr. Blackwood planted it there. Mama never stole nothing. Did she tell anyone about the letter? Try to use it to defend herself?" "She tried. But who was going to believe a Mexican housekeeper over Samuel Blackwood? The sheriff was in Blackwood's pocket, and the judge was his poker partner. Mama was convicted and hanged within a month." Jack stared at the letter fragment in his hands, his mind racing. If this was genuine, if it really did contain clues to the Lost Dutchman's mine, it would be worth a fortune. Certainly worth killing for. "Where's the rest of the letter?" Jack asked. "That's the thing," Danny said, leaning forward. "Before they arrested Mama, she managed to hide the complete letter somewhere on Blackwood's ranch. She told me where, but made me promise not to go after it unless something happened to her. And now something has. Yes, sir. Mama said if anything ever happened to her, I should find the letter and use it to make a new life for myself. She said Papa would have wanted that." Jack studied the boy's earnest face. Danny believed every word of his story, and Jack found himself believing it too. He'd seen enough corruption in his time to know that powerful men like Blackwood could easily frame an innocent woman, especially one with no connections or influence. "This is dangerous, Danny," Jack said finally. "If Blackwood killed your mother for this letter, he won't hesitate to kill you too." "I know, sir, but it's all I got left of my family. And if there really is gold out there—" Danny's voice trailed off, but Jack could hear the hope underneath the words. Jack looked around his empty kitchen, thinking of his own lost family and the hollow life he'd been living since Tommy's death. Here was a boy who'd lost everything, just like Jack had. But unlike Jack, Danny still had hope, still believed in the possibility of a better future. "Where did your mother hide the letter?" Jack asked quietly. Danny's eyes widened. "You mean you'll help me?" Jack thought of Sarah, somewhere in California, probably remarried by now to a man who could give her the happiness Jack had failed to provide. He thought of Tommy's grave on the hill and the empty years stretching ahead of him. "Yeah," Jack said, surprising himself. "I'll help you. But we do this smart, and we do it careful. Blackwood's a dangerous man." For the first time since Jack had met him, Danny smiled. a real smile that transformed his whole face. "Thank you, Mr. Hollister. You won't regret this." Jack hoped the boy was right, because once they went after that letter, there would be no turning back. The Blackwood Ranch sprawled across the desert landscape like a small kingdom, its adobe buildings and corrals stretching as far as the eye could see. Jack and Danny lay on their bellies atop a rocky ridge, studying the layout through Jack's field glasses as the sun began to set behind the Superstition Mountains. "There," Danny whispered, pointing toward a large barn near the main house. "That's where Mama hid the letter. She said she put it in a metal box and buried it under the loose floorboard in the tack room." Jack adjusted the focus on his glasses, counting the armed men he could see patrolling the property. "Blackwood's got this place locked up tight. I count at least 6 guards, and that's just what we can see. He's been paranoid ever since Mama died," Danny said. "Word is he's convinced someone's going to come looking for that letter eventually." "Smart man," Jack muttered. "Too bad he's also a murderer." They'd spent the past 3 days planning this mission, riding out from Jack's ranch each morning to scout the Blackwood property from different angles. Jack had also made some discreet inquiries in Tucson, learning more about Samuel Blackwood's operation and reputation. What he'd discovered wasn't encouraging. Blackwood was indeed a powerful man with connections throughout the territory. He owned not just the ranch, but also interests in several mines, a freight company, and even a bank. The local sheriff, Tom Morrison, was rumored to be on Blackwood's payroll, along with half the town council. "We'll wait until after midnight," Jack said, lowering the glasses. "Most of the hands will be asleep by then, and the guards will be tired and less alert." "What about the dogs?" Danny asked. "Blackwood keeps 3 big mastiffs that patrol the grounds at night." Jack reached into his saddlebag and pulled out several strips of beef jerky, seasoned with a mild sedative he'd obtained from the town veterinarian. "These should keep them quiet for a few hours, just enough to let us get in and out." As darkness fell, they made their way down from the ridge, leading their horses on foot to avoid making noise. Jack had insisted on bringing Rosie despite the risk. If things went bad, they'd need fast horses to escape. The ranch was quieter now, with only the occasional sound of cattle lowing in the distance and the soft murmur of voices from the bunkhouse. Jack and Danny crept through the shadows, avoiding the pools of lamplight that spilled from the main house windows. The first mastiff appeared as they approached the barn, a massive black beast that could have easily taken down a grown man. But the drugged beef jerky did its job, and within minutes the dog was lying peacefully in the dirt, snoring softly. "2 more to go," Jack whispered. They found the other dogs near the corral and the main house, dispatching them with the same method. Jack felt a twinge of guilt about drugging the animals, but it was better than the alternative. The barn was dark and filled with the familiar smells of hay, leather, and horses. Danny led the way to the tack room, moving with the confidence of someone who'd spent time here before. "Mama used to bring me here sometimes when she worked late," Danny explained quietly. "Said it was better than leaving me alone in town." The tack room was small and cramped, filled with saddles, bridles, and other equipment. Danny went straight to a corner where several loose floorboards created a small gap. "Here," he said, kneeling down and prying up one of the boards. "She said she buried it about 2 feet down." Jack kept watch at the door, while Danny dug with a small shovel they'd brought. The boy worked quickly but carefully, and within 10 minutes his shovel struck something metallic. "Got it!" Danny whispered excitedly, pulling a small tin box from the hole. Inside the box, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a complete letter written in the same careful handwriting as the fragment Danny had shown Jack. But this letter was much longer and more detailed, with what appeared to be a complete set of directions to the lost Dutchman's mine. "My God," Jack breathed, reading over Danny's shoulder by the light of a small lantern. "If this is real." "It's real," a cold voice said from the doorway. "And it's mine." Jack spun around to find Samuel Blackwood standing in the entrance to the tack room, flanked by 2 armed men. Blackwood was a tall, imposing figure in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of cold, calculating eyes that Jack had seen on other powerful men who believed they owned everything and everyone around them. "Mr. Blackwood," Danny said, his voice steady despite the obvious fear in his eyes. "Danny Martinez," Blackwood replied with a thin smile. "I wondered when you'd show up. Your mother was stubborn, but I knew you'd be smart enough to come for what she hid. That letter belongs to my family," Danny said, clutching the document to his chest. "Your family is dead, boy, and that letter belongs to whoever's strong enough to take it." Blackwood gestured to his men. "Kill the man. Bring me the boy and the letter." Jack's hand moved to his gun, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. The two gunmen had their weapons already drawn, and there was no way he could outdraw both of them. "Wait," Jack said, raising his hand slowly. "Let's talk about this like civilized men." "There's nothing to talk about," Blackwood replied. "You're trespassing on my property and stealing my property. The penalty for that is death." "Your property?" Danny's voice cracked with emotion. "You murdered my mother for this letter." "I executed a thief," Blackwood said coldly, "just like I'm about to execute another one." But Danny had spent months living on the streets, and desperation had taught him to be quick. As Blackwood's men raised their guns, the boy suddenly threw the lantern at the nearest gunman and dove behind a pile of saddles. The lantern shattered against the man's chest, splashing burning oil across his shirt and filling the small room with flames. In the confusion that followed, Jack drew his Colt .45 and put 2 bullets into the burning gunman before turning on the second man. The remaining gunman got off 1 shot that splintered the wood near Jack's head before Jack's return fire caught him in the chest, dropping him to the floor. Blackwood had drawn his own weapon, but Danny suddenly appeared behind him, swinging a heavy bridle that caught the rancher across the back of the head. Blackwood stumbled forward, his shot going wide, and Jack's next bullet took him center mass. "The barn's on fire!" Danny shouted, as flames from the broken lantern began to spread through the dry hay and wood. Jack grabbed the letter from where Danny had dropped it and pushed the boy toward the door. "Move! This whole place is going to go up!" They ran from the burning barn as shouts erupted from the bunkhouse and main house. Jack could see men running toward them with guns and lanterns, and he knew they had only seconds before the entire ranch would be swarming with Blackwood's men. "The horses!" Jack yelled, leading Danny toward the spot where they'd left Rosie and Danny's borrowed mount. Gunshots rang out behind them as Blackwood's remaining men realized what was happening. Bullets whined through the air around them as they reached their horses and swung into the saddles. "Ride!" Jack shouted, spurring Rosie into a gallop. They thundered across the desert with the sound of pursuit growing behind them. The burning barn lit up the night sky like a beacon, and Jack could hear more men mounting up to follow them. "Where are we going?" Danny called out, his smaller horse struggling to keep pace with Rosie. "Somewhere they can't follow us," Jack replied, turning toward the rocky foothills of the Superstition Mountains. The terrain grew rougher as they climbed, forcing their pursuers to slow down. Jack knew these mountains from his younger days when he'd done some prospecting himself. There were hidden canyons and caves where they could lose themselves until the heat died down. Behind them, the Blackwood Ranch continued to burn, and Jack knew there would be no going back. They'd crossed a line tonight, and Samuel Blackwood's death would bring the full weight of his organization down on their heads. But as they rode through the moonlit desert with the precious letter secure in Jack's saddlebag, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Purpose. For the first time since Tommy's death, he had something worth fighting for. "You did good back there," Jack called out to Danny as they reached a hidden canyon where they could rest their horses. "So did you," Danny replied, his young face flushed with excitement and fear. "Do you think the letter's real? Do you think we can really find the mine?" Jack looked up at the star-filled sky above the Superstition Mountains, thinking of all the treasure hunters who died searching for the lost Dutchman's gold. Then he looked at Danny's hopeful face and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I guess we're about to find out," Jack said with a smile. "But first we need to stay alive long enough to try." The adventure was just beginning, and somewhere in these ancient mountains lay either their fortune or their graves. 3 weeks later, Jack and Danny stood at the edge of a hidden canyon deep in the Superstition Mountains, staring at what remained of an old mine shaft carved into the rock face. The journey to find this place had been harrowing. They'd been pursued by Blackwood's remaining men, faced down rattlesnakes and scorching desert heat, and nearly died of thirst twice. But the letter had been true. Every landmark, every turn, every cryptic clue had led them here to this remote canyon that seemed untouched by time. "This is it," Danny whispered, his voice filled with awe. "This is really it." Jack studied the mine entrance, noting the careful stonework around the opening and the ancient wooden supports that somehow still held firm. "Your father was a smart man, Danny. He found something that men have been searching for since before you were born." They'd spent the past week carefully exploring the mine, using ropes and lanterns to navigate the narrow tunnels that wound deep into the mountain. What they'd found had exceeded even their wildest dreams. The Lost Dutchman's mine wasn't just real, it was incredibly rich. Veins of gold ran through the rock like golden rivers, and the deeper they went, the more abundant the ore became. Jacob Waltz, the legendary Dutchman, had barely scratched the surface of what lay buried in these mountains. "How much do you think it's worth?" Danny asked as they prepared to enter the mine for another day of careful extraction. "More than we could spend in 10 lifetimes, Jack replied honestly. "But we have to be smart about this. Take too much too fast, and we'll attract attention. We need to work slowly, carefully, and get the gold to market in small amounts." Over the following months, they developed a system. Jack would spend several days at a time in the mine, carefully extracting the richest ore and hiding it in various caches throughout the mountains. Danny, meanwhile, had proven surprisingly adept at selling small amounts of gold dust in different towns, always claiming it came from various played-out claims. The boy had grown during their time together, both physically and emotionally. The scared, hungry street orphan Jack had first met was becoming a confident young man with a quick mind for business and an unshakable loyalty to the man who'd become his surrogate father. "Jack," Danny said one evening as they sat around their campfire, "what are we going to do with all this gold? I mean, eventually we're going to have more money than we know what to do with." Jack had been thinking about the same question. The gold was a means to an end, but what was that end? What did he really want from life? "I've been thinking about that," Jack said slowly. "There's something I need to do first. Something I should have done a long time ago." "What's that?" "I need to go to California. I need to find Sarah." Danny's face fell slightly. "You're gonna leave me?" "No," Jack said firmly, reaching over to squeeze the boy's shoulder. "We're going to California. Together." "You're my family now, Danny, and families stick together." The smile that spread across Danny's face was brighter than the campfire. "You mean it? You really want me to come with you?" "I mean it. But first, we need to make this official." Jack pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right time. It's adoption papers. If you're willing, I'd like to make you my legal son." Danny stared at the papers with tears in his eyes. You want to adopt me? Really?" "Really. You've been more of a son to me these past months than I ever thought I'd have again. Tommy would have liked you, Danny. He would have been proud to call you his brother." That night, they celebrated with the best meal their supplies could provide, and Jack felt a warmth in his heart that had nothing to do with the campfire. He'd found something more valuable than gold in these mountains. He'd found a family. The trip to California took 2 months, with Jack and Danny traveling as a successful father and son prospecting team. They'd converted enough gold to purchase a substantial bank draft, along with new clothes, good horses, and all the trappings of newly wealthy men. Jack's hands shook as he knocked on the door of the small farmhouse outside Sacramento where Sarah's parents lived. He'd sent a telegram ahead asking if he could visit, but he hadn't explained why. Sarah herself answered the door, and Jack's breath caught in his throat. She was still beautiful, though there were new lines around her eyes and silver threads in her dark hair. She wore a simple blue dress and an expression of cautious surprise. "Jack," she said softly, I got your telegram. I wasn't sure you'd really come." "Hello, Sarah." Jack removed his hat, suddenly feeling like a nervous schoolboy. You look wonderful. You look different," she said, studying his face. "Older, but happier somehow. And who's this young man?" "This is Danny." Jack said, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. Danny Martinez. He's my son now. Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise, but she smiled warmly at Danny. It's nice to meet you, Danny. Please, both of you, come in. Over the next several hours, Jack told Sarah everything. About meeting Danny, about the letter and the mine, about the gold and the adventure that had changed both their lives. But most importantly, he told her about the man he'd become. I know I failed you before, Jack said, as they sat on the porch while Danny played with Sarah's parents' dog in the yard. I know I let my grief consume me and push you away when we should have been helping each other heal. Jack, Sarah began, but he held up his hand. Let me finish. I can't change the past, and I can't bring Tommy back, but I can promise you that I'm not the same broken man you left 3 years ago. Danny helped me remember what it means to be a father, what it means to have hope for the future. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching Danny laugh as the dog chased him around the yard. He's a good boy. I can see how much he means to you. He saved my life, Sarah. Not just that night when I fell off my horse, but every day since. He gave me a reason to live again, a reason to be better than I was. And the gold? The mine? Jack smiled. Enough to buy us a new ranch, a new start. Enough to give Danny the education and opportunities he deserves. Enough to build the life we always dreamed of, if you'll have us. Sarah turned to look at him, and Jack saw tears in her eyes. I never stopped loving you, Jack. I couldn't bear to stay in that house with all those memories. Every room reminded me of what we'd lost. Then we'll build new rooms, Jack said, taking her hand. New memories. We'll honor Tommy's memory, but we won't let it define our future. What about Danny? How does he feel about all this? Jack looked out at the boy who'd become his son, remembering their conversation the night before. He wants a family as much as we do. He's already lost one mother. He doesn't want to lose another chance at having one. Sarah was quiet for several more minutes, and Jack held his breath, waiting for her answer. Finally, she squeezed his hand and smiled. I'd like that, she said softly. I'd like that very much. 6 months later, Jack stood on the porch of their new ranch house in the green hills of Northern California, watching Sarah teach Danny how to tend her vegetable garden. The house was bigger than their old place in Arizona, with room for the family they hoped to continue growing. The lost Dutchman's mine remained their secret, though Jack had quietly used the gold to make investments that would ensure their financial security for generations. Danny was enrolled in the best school in the county, though he still helped Jack with the ranch work every day after classes. Papa Jack, Danny called out, using the name he'd chosen for his adoptive father. Mama Sarah says dinner's almost ready. Coming, Jack called back, marveling at how natural those words sounded. Papa Jack and Mama Sarah, a family forged not by blood, but by choice and love. As he walked toward the house, Jack thought about that night 3 years ago when he'd fallen off his horse in a drunken stupor, convinced his life was over. He'd been wrong. Sometimes the end of one story was just the beginning of another. A street urchin's act of kindness had led to the greatest treasure of all, not gold, but redemption, not riches, but family, not just survival, but a life worth living. Tommy would always be in their hearts. But now his memory was part of something larger, a family that had found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something beautiful together. The lonely cowboy was lonely no more. Hello, how are you? Did you enjoy the story? Like, share, comment on which city you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel to help us continue adding new amazing videos. Thank you very much, and come back often.